Hello there, people of the internet. My name is Keenan Taylor. I am a scientific illustrator and published fantasy author. My literary debut, Tales of Kaimere, is an anthology of short stories and novellas set in Kaimere, an original fantasy setting. Since I was 12, I have dreamed of being an author and spent much of my time developing the setting of my literary work. It began as an island in the Bermuda Triangle, populated by elves and dinosaurs, and has since developed into a full planet occupied by a diverse range of creatures and cultures. To kick off my YouTube channel, I thought it would be good to begin by answering one of the most frequently asked questions on the Q&As I host on Instagram. What is Kaimere? Kaimere is the fictional setting of my literary work. It is a planet much like Earth in size, albeit a bit larger, distance from its sun, gravitational pull, and climate. Kaimere is inhabited by plants and animals we might find in our own world today, such as humans, leopards, hippos, and oak trees, along with flora and fauna we would recognize as animals long extinct on Earth, such as dinosaurs, giant sloths, and pterosaurs. Evolving in a new context has led some animals to take quite divergent evolutionary paths compared to their earthly kin, some looking quite unrecognizable to the point that we might think them aliens. However, the truth is that there are no animals or plants truly endemic to Kaimere. All have immigrated from Earth at some point throughout history and adapted to this strange planet. What brings all of this life to Kaimere? The answer to that question is the endemic life of Kaimere. Kaimere is a planet over 100 light years away. Within its solar system, it is in the habitable zone. There is plenty of water, and the atmospheric composition is similar to that on Earth. On Kaimere, the native life has not developed into multicellular forms. All endemic organisms are unicellular. Mostly, these tiny creatures inhabit the many oceans and waterways, making up part of the photosynthetic plankton base of the oceanic food chain. But some can survive dehydrating conditions and grow on land or float in the air. There are many that grow as vast clusters of photosynthetic organisms large enough to be seen by the naked eye, which were dominant for millions of years. They would later be called purple algae by human migrants. This purple algae isn't true algae, but microbes with retinal photosynthesizers that absorb green light instead of reflecting it like chlorophyll does. But it is structurally similar enough to algae to be given the name. Another notable group of endemic life has developed a certain collective consciousness within a clonal swarm. This could be seen as intelligence, but it would be more appropriate to think of it as a computer than animal intelligence. Although too small to be seen individually, we can detect a swarm as somewhat of a haze or mist. They are predators, feeding on photosynthetic organisms like purple algae. These swarms are called portals. The portals can send out a portion of the swarm as a sort of satellite to harvest water, minerals, food, and other resources. The satellite can send the molecular composition back to their main swarm, which can then replicate that resource in their home to optimize their territory. This form of data collection and replicating resources to optimize their habitat was a key to this group's success. For millions of years, these swarms of portals and their far-reaching colonies dominated the planet on land and sea. They essentially terraformed the surface, mostly cultivating purple algae in desired places and quantities to be consumed. In a sense, this purple algae was the first domesticated life form. Around 370 million years ago, a particularly large swarm from Kaimere's southern hemisphere sent a satellite not out to the ocean or deeper inland, but to the stars. It is not known if this was a fluke or intentionally seeking the beyond, but it did not stop until it reached a planet that also supported life, Earth. The satellite established a colony and harvested life from Earth, mostly plants, which their main swarm recreated back home. It then sent out satellites from its own to gather as much flora and fauna from Earth as possible. This main swarm and its colony thus became the portal to Kaimere from Earth. It was using this method that animals and plants were introduced to Kaimere. Plants are much more efficient photosynthesizers than the purple algae that dominated Kaimere at the time, and the swarms preferred to feed on plants than their former prey. In a geological blink of an eye, plants became widespread. The animals, fungi, and other kingdoms of life on Earth swiftly populated, likely assisted by the hives of native life trying to optimize their world for their new favorite food, which animals were already well adapted for. In making Kaimere optimal for plants, animals shared in a swift success, and the native life of Kaimere inadvertently doomed themselves. Periodic waves of invasive species were brought through the portal, and within a few million years, the oceans and nearby continents were dominated by life from Earth. Endemic Kaimeran life, from the portal, other clonal swarms trying to shape their habitats, and the very same purple algae that once defined Kaimere were all relegated to the shadows. To this day, the main portal still harvests life from Earth. These collection events happen as follows. A satellite is sent from the colony to a random spot on Earth, where it collects life for a few thousand years, depositing them in nearby appropriate habitats in Kaimere, then dies. Kaimeran scholars believe the frequency is dependent on the main portal and its assessment of its own environmental health. When the climate is arid or cold, the frequency is reduced, perhaps in an attempt to conserve resources. The portal is also less frequent in floral and faunal collection when the environment is especially stable. From about 75 million years to 15 million years ago, during the mainland dynasty of the hadrosaurs, horned dinosaurs, and tyrannosaurs, the ecology was reliable, and sauropods maintained climate stability independent of the dynastic ecosystem by cultivating the forests to their needs. In this environmental golden age, the portal seems to have harvested only 3 or 4 times, with few of these leaving descendants. This stability in climate and ecology concluded with the dynastic extinction, when a majority of hadrosaurs, horned dinosaurs, and tyrants died out due to the separation of their mainland continent, which triggered dramatic climate change that made their interdependent nesting settlements impossible to maintain. As so often happens, specialization led to dominance in times of plenty, and extinction when the context changes. From this extinction event 15 million years ago to about 14 million years ago, there was no portal activity because the climate was unstable, arid, and at times quite cold. Once the climate recovered, in part because the titanosaur sauropods got back to the ecosystem engineer and stabilizer roles that defined them, the portal activity spiked to almost every million years, and sometimes more, in an effort to repopulate the decrease in biomass that the portal sensed in the region. An unfortunate byproduct of this increased activity is that the constant influx of invasive species has triggered a lot of extinctions from competition and disease, which then triggers yet more satellite openings. It has become a vicious cycle. This influx of organisms from Earth, combined with a floral and faunal interchange between the former mainland continent with the subcontinent of Picardia and the western continent of Arvel, has made the known world astonishingly diverse and competitive. It was into this volatile world that the most recent portal deposited a small population of Homo sapiens from North Africa 400,000 years ago, which later became the great civilizations whose stories I tell in Tales of Kaimere, an anthology of short stories that is my literary debut. In future videos, I will discuss these cultures, some of the major clades of animals that populate Kaimere, creature profiles, and the endemic life that continues to shape Kaimere's destiny from the sidelines. You can find more information about the creatures, cultures, and characters by following me on Instagram, Twitter, and DeviantArt through the links in the description below. You can also support my work on Patreon at Illustrated Menagerie. That's all for now. Thank you all for joining me on my first video on Kaimere, and have a wonderful day. Cheers, folks.